Yes, please. I have been saying that. The linear. Nature of. Phonological representations was. Criticized and was questioned within. The SPE. Account. So because. It didn't. Allow for. The formulation, the adequate and the. Good formulation of. A number of phenomena, among which we have the phenomenon of stress. We also have the phenomenon of tone and other things. So then we have, as we discussed in class, within, nonlinear theories, we had, the emergence of a theory that is called autosegmental, phonology, and which was basically concerned with, the nonlinear representation of tone. And we had the representations like the ones given on page, 202, in which case, in order to deal with the tonal, patterns or tonal phenomena, we need to, have two, different, tiers or, levels. One on which we represent segments, and it is called the segmental tier. It's called the segmental tier, and the other on which we represent tones only, and it's called tone tier. It's called the tone tier. So this model of phonological representation, as I told you before, is called autosegmental phonology, and I told you that it was exclusively devoted to account for tonal phenomena in African languages. Another representation, another example of this kind of nonlinear representation, if you still remember, comes from the behavior of Arabic verbs. Arabic verbs where the canonical pattern, banyan, we have CV, banyan, CVV, CVC. Is associated with the reciprocal, while the pattern, CVC, CVCC as associated with the causative. So, in order to account for, this, difference, and for this reason, it was suggested that each verb can be analyzed as comprising three components: the root tier, as you can see here. So if we consider the example of kataba, katab. Now it's katab to correspond with katab. Katab. So here within katab, we have a skeletal tier, what we call a skeletal tier or a root, which is made up only of consonants. It's ktib. It's ktib, you see? And this ktib, we try to insert certain vowels or vocalic patterns to this, consonantal tier or skeletal tier in order to derive, different, patterns, canonical forms of verbs. So that we may have CVC, VVC, that is to say, كاتب, 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 كاتب. And we have a CV pattern, and we have a melody. So the melody basically refers to vowels. That is to say, the representation of a vowel. Vowels, as you can see, are also isolated. They are isolated and put on a separate level. They are separated from consonants, and this is what makes the difference between. If you already discussed this with your Professor Shabani in class. This is basically what makes the difference between concatenative morphology and non-concatenative. Concatenative morphology is a morphology, for instance, that we find in English and in other languages. That is to say, in which consonants and vowels cannot be separated. We have them on one level, on one line. we have concatenation of consonants and vowels. But for, languages like, standard Arabic, we have, non-concatenative morphology, in the sense that we can have, consonants and vowels, represented on different tiers. They are not concatenated. They are not concatenated, but they are non-concatenated, okay? And that's the meaning. And we have kettab, 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 in which case we will have, CVC, CVC. So then the consonants are called the root or the skeletal tier, the consonantal tier, and we have CV patterns or canonical patterns that we already discussed in relation to syllable structure. And we have a melody. A melody, as I have just said, is basically dealing with vowels. So these examples indicate that there is a hierarchy, as we discussed it in class. There is a hierarchy characterizing, human speech that phonological representation should account for. So, as such, within this endeavor, that is to say, within nonlinear theories of phonological representation, many attempts have been made to come up with models more adequate than the one proposed in the standard paradigm assumed, in this book. Some of these are autosegmental phonology. That was first, initiated by Goldsmith in 1976. Metrical phonology, as we already, discussed some of its, concerns in our face-to-face classes. And it was initiated by Lieberman and Prince, 1977. We also had dependency phonology, initiated by Anderson and Ewan in 1980, among other things. All these theories have been developed to provide new explanations to old phenomena, such as stress, or explanations to phenomena that the standard model could not handle or account for successfully, such as tone. It should be pointed out in this regard that all these models are generative in spirit. Yes, we are shifting then from, the structuralist paradigm that was outlined in phonemics to the generativist paradigm that is outlined in this file. So they differ only in terms of phonological representation rather than theory. They differ only in terms of their phonological, representation, but they do not differ in terms of assumptions and principles. So to summarize, so it emerges from this discussion that in this file dealing with phonology, that phonology basically deals with sound pattern of individual languages. So it means that the way distinctions in speech sounds are used to differentiate linguistic items, the ways in which sounds are combined in various environments, and the ways in which sounds undergo change as a function of the other, sounds in various contexts. So phonology and phonetics both involve sound in natural language, but differ in that phonetics deals with sounds, from a language independent point of view, while phonology studies the ways in which they are distributed and used within individual languages. So phonemics assumed a major principle, stating that phonemes are minimal contrastive sound units in language, each composed of a set of distinctive features. Later work in phonology showed that a focus on surface contrast was not adequate. Hence, modern phonology replaced this with a conception of phonology as an aspect of speakers' knowledge of sound structure. The focus shifted then to the relation between phonological and mastered.
You are currently the only person in this conference.
If you have mastered, I mean, the material in this file, you should be able to do the following things. First, you should be able to parse word forms into morphemes and recognize the phonological processes that some sounds have undergone. You should be able to account for allomorphy by providing phonological rules. You should be able to make and defend conclusions about the basic underlying shape of morphemes, write phonological rules, argue for certain analysis for data which may be analyzed in more than one way. You should recognize that phonological processes may be sensitive to the presence or absence of stress. You should recognize that phonological processes may be sensitive to syllable structure, as is the case of stress, for instance, which is sensitive to syllable weight, in the sense that in some languages we may have the location of stress dependent on syllable weight. Or, you should recognize that phonological processes may occur in non-influential contexts due to language-specific considerations or universal motivations. So in order to make sure that you really grasp, the content, the content areas of, this file, you should, do the exercises in the practicals, following this file. And I'm ready to check them with you, as I told you before. I'm ready to check them with you, as I told you, before, okay? So I hope that I could simplify the content of the different files involved in this book, namely the file dealing with phonetics, the file dealing with phonemics, and some of the things, the content areas that are dealt with in this file that is dealing with modern phonology, basically. Starting from the SPE and ending up, with some recent, phonological, sorry, some recent phonological, theories, like, the ones that were referred to as nonlinear, theories of phonological representation, like, autosegmental phonology, metrical phonology, syllable structure theory, and among other things, okay? So I hope you good luck. I would reiterate the fact that you have to do the practices you have in phonetics, you have in morpheme, we have in phonemics, and the one you have in this file dealing with phonology. The practice is of paramount importance, because it's going to, it's going to enable you to familiarize yourself with, questions that you may have in the exam. Questions that you may have in the exam. And also, the practice gives you the opportunity to test your abilities, whether you could understand what, was involved or not. So I hope you good luck. So looking forward to meeting you, on, the platform for, some interactions, like, for instance, correcting your exercises, answering your questions, or anything you like to ask about. You are welcome on the platform. You are welcome on the platform. So thank you for your attention. Looking then forward, as I have just said, to meeting you on the platform, God willing.